If you're a martial artist, you've definitely heard it before. That's not a real martial art. Yeah, but technically that's not traditional Taekwondo. Oh, y'all use weapons, so you're not a traditional school. What color belt is he? Oh, y'all are one of those schools? You can find tons of videos and articles discussing and arguing the pros and cons of traditional versus non-traditional martial arts. So if you find out that the school that you've been training in for years now is a non-traditional school, does that mean all of your training is all of a sudden invalid? Or if you practice somewhere that is traditional, does that mean that all of the modern advances and all of the things that were discovered after your art was founded, does that mean that you're missing out on all of those? I'm not really here to argue one over the other. If you know me, you know I more advocate for you to make your own decisions. To me, the most important things are finding a good school and a good instructor, and if you can find something that has good quality in those two, and it's also something that you enjoy, I think that's more important than anything else. I don't necessarily think that titles or ranks or awards and like tournaments are the factors that are most important just in and of themselves. I think they are important in that they can help you determine those schools that are quality, but I think a lot of times certain schools will use those things to boast themselves and make themselves look better just so they can garner more business. But yeah, why is it so important that a school practices a traditional martial art or doesn't? So I think one of the arguments for practicing traditional arts is that you're basing your training off of whoever founded that art and the things that they put in place, and you're trying to keep them as close as you can to those original placements because you trust that if somebody or some group of people was smart enough and was devoted enough to put together an art that's still alive today, they must have known what they were doing, so you wouldn't want to mess with the system that they have, right? Because if you have somebody that comes off the street and just starts flipping switches and making changes to things, they might throw off, what the originators of the art had in mind, and it no longer bears the purpose that it once did and that what it was invented for. I'll take Hapkido for instance. Some modern schools have taken out things like the breathing exercises and the meditation and mental training that we do in place of more physical things. They want to spend more time in the class on sparring or self-defense, or devote more time to actively doing something rather than something that seems more passive and may not show you more tangible results. And yes, I think removing something like that, those people don't realize what the meaning of those things are, and that can throw off the meaning and the purpose of the art that you're trying to practice. So in that sense, I think maintaining tradition is important so that you're not removing something that is vital to the training or adding something that's detrimental to the training. But on the other hand, maintaining tradition just for the sake of maintaining it may not always be the best approach. A lot of the modern arts that we practice today aren't really that old in terms of when they were officially established, but they do have roots dating back hundreds and maybe thousands of years. But with each generation we learn more and we advance more, and science and medicine advance more and more rapidly and more exponentially, and we basically piggyback off the knowledge and research that was gained over all those generations before us, and then we can devote time to putting our own 2 cents into whatever it is. It's kind of like reinventing the wheel. The first person to discover or figure something out took a lot more time to figure that out than it takes for them to teach it to you, right? The generation before us may have devoted all their time on this one genre or this one technique, but what took them the entire generation to develop the system and to figure it out, it only takes a fraction of that time to instill that in us, the next generation. And then we can possess that knowledge, and then we can use that. Now we have more time than they do because they're no longer, and we can devote that time into improving or adding things that will edify what we're learning. But that takes us back to the original argument of traditional arts. And not every addition that you make and not every discovery that you make is useful, and it's not always a good thing. So I think I, as a practitioner, might take a technique that was made by a master years ago and figure out that there is an easier way to do it, and then I can apply that technique, and I figured out a way to improve it. But what I might not realize, because I've not tested it enough and because I'm one person, is that whatever technique that is and that change that I've made makes it a lot easier to counter or a lot easier to get out of. And that original master might have already tried what I'm trying to change, and he just omitted that way of doing the technique because he realized how not useful it is, and somehow that didn't get passed on to me. but I feel like, ooh, I'm making an addition to this art. I'm putting my own signature on this. This is something that I get to contribute to this community. And that's another topic. I think as a society, we are like obsessed with updates. You know, if you have your phone and you have all these apps that constantly update, you know, sometimes those updates don't seem like they do anything. Sometimes they seem to retract from what the app did, but it's just because they have to meet their update quota. We haven't updated the app in so many months, so we need to do something. We need to change something just so it looks like we're improving. And then you fast forward to months later and they just revert it back to the original way that it was. You know, but they got to put in 2 updates to make it seem like they're constantly improving. I think some of us have that attitude when we're practicing something for so long. We feel like if we're not adding something to it or changing it in some way, that we're not progressing or advancing. But a lot of schools can claim that they're traditional just so that they seem more official. But you know, what even constitutes traditional? Some arts like Taekwondo have the Kukiwan, which is, you know, a governing body that keeps things in check and oversees the schools that are a part of it. You know, it officially licenses and certifies people within the organization to teach the curriculum and carry things out the way that the organization intends, to keep some sense of unity across the board and around the world with 2 different schools that aren't affiliated, but they're both part of this organization, so they kind of have these common points, so that if they, you know, collaborate or the student transfers one way or the other, they can maintain their rank and kind of have the same training in both places. But you know, there's some schools that do teach Taekwondo that are not part of the Kukiwan, and they may teach some of the principles and they may use a lot of the same curriculum, but they're not officially part of this governing body, so they don't have to conform to all of the rules and regulations that a Kukiwan certified school does. You know, and that could be a big deal and it could not. They could still be a really quality school, and that's why I tell you to do your own research and, you know, don't just go by the cover. Don't just go by what you read or the names and titles that you get, because they don't always mean something. You can't really know if something is right for you unless you try it. You can obviously look at reviews. If the school has reviews somewhere online, that is a good sign if they're good reviews. But like I always say, do a trial class and try to see if this is something that you think you can get into, and then hopefully they don't put you in a contract for like a year or something crazy like that. But you know, you can stick to it for a little while, and then after a while you'll know if it's right for you or not. But you know, I kind of liken the traditional versus non-traditional arts to cooking. You see it a lot in traditional recipes, and I think it's even more prevalent there. You can look up any, you know, standard recipe online and then scroll to the comments and you'll read how many people say it's not traditional because you use this ingredient, or it's not traditional because you did this method a little differently. For example, if you make a carbonara pasta, an Italian pasta, the traditional ingredient is guanciale that you put into the dish. But you know, especially in America, a lot of people use bacon instead. It's still a, you know, pork product, but it's not the traditional product that was originated. And when people see that, they pitch a fit and they say, this isn't traditional, you can't call it carbonara. But in the end, those people that use the bacon still enjoy the dish and it still tastes good to them and it's still satisfying. And is that not what the point of cooking is? I understand it's to honor those people that originated and named this recipe because they came up with this method and they did all these things in this order to make this dish the way it is. But like I said, with time, things advance and things become more modernized. And you know, a lot of these traditional recipes have been improved in my opinion. You know, I love to cook and I've seen different variations on these recipes, and I sometimes prefer the modernized version to the traditional version. Speaking of cooking, I don't really like to self-promote much, but I do also have a cooking channel where I make very, very simple and low quality cooking videos. Every once in a while I do something where I talk over it, but I'm going to link that channel in the description just in case anybody's interested in subscribing to that. But back to the topic, I think that's an analogy that we can kind of understand these attitudes in martial arts is, you know, it's not always a bad thing to update and to put more knowledge into something that's already been created. I'm not big on titles meaning too much. You know, I don't care if certain things are called martial arts that a lot of people don't think are martial arts. That doesn't bother me, you know, one way or another. You know, I do understand, like I said, the originator of these arts, you know, named it, and we should honor them and we should hold some of these things in place. But I don't think, just for the sake of keeping tradition, should we just abandon all possible advancement and trying to discover newer and better ways to do things that these originators started. So if you're an extremist, you probably don't like this channel, because I usually in my videos trying to come to a center point between two sides of a discussion or an argument. I try to see both sides, and I try to understand why each feels the way that they do. And my goal is to help those that don't see the other side so well to see some of the reasons that these people feel this way. And it's not always somebody trying to oppose you for the sake of opposing you. It's not always someone trying to create division and create issues between people. Sometimes it is, and I just say to avoid those people entirely, because there's really no good that comes out of trying to reason with somebody that's being difficult for the sake of being difficult. But as you know, I like to discuss things. If you would like to leave a comment, what kind of arts do you practice, and do you practice something that's traditional or not traditional, and do you have feelings or thoughts about why or why not? I appreciate all of you that made it this far. Thank you for watching, and keep training.